Ashleigh Chapman. She is the founder and CEO of Justice U. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Josh. Lovely to be with you today.
July 30th is a very important day that I believe more people need to be aware of. And it's kind of, we've heard Human Trafficking Day, but this day, the title, and I want to make sure I get it right, because it is the UN's World Day Against Trafficking in Persons.
Which basically means that the United Nations General Assembly in 2013 set this up as a World Day to raise awareness of the reality of human trafficking across our globe. So the reality day being over 40 million souls enslaved in labor, sex, and organ trafficking.
If one person listening right now can grab this information and make a difference, then I think we've done our job. But for Justice U and what you're doing to really put a dent to stop human trafficking as best as possible, please explain what exactly Justice U is.
So Justice U is an online learning platform that we just launched, and I'm very excited about it because it equips every single person to understand how they are uniquely positioned to engage. So you're absolutely right. Every single person has such an opportunity to not just understand what trafficking is, but to see it in their local communities, to report it, and then so much more, right? There's so much that we can do. Every person is uniquely positioned to do, and Justice U will walk you through that journey.
What I like and what I read about is on your, I wanted to ask you, is it coinciding with what you're doing with Justice U, but the Everyday Heroes Challenge? Because when I was reading about it, how it said that people can take the courses and they can get their badge to where I guess it's kind of like a certification of understanding human trafficking and what you can do to kind of be an advocate against it, to bring that awareness. Are the two, Justice U and the Everyday Challenge, are they kind of bleeding in here? Because you have a goal of 1 million people to take the course. Where are we at with that right now?
So yes, they are blended together. So Justice U is what you'd go to. So learnwithjusticeu.com is where you'd start.
Okay.
And it's going to start taking you on a journey to earn your badge, right? And a badge is like a digital certification that you can share in every possible medium that you want to, social media, with your company, with, just your general knowledge. It's a great thing to have. And you can take it on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, whatever way you want to take it, it works. So it's really easy. It's very accessible. And it's going to walk you through not just this big, scary thing that we call human trafficking, right? Because that sounds like a world day, right? That sounds just so out there, right? It's not something we feel like we can touch. But the reality is it's closer than you think. And so are the solutions, right? And you're part of that story. So we're wanting to help every person. We're actually wanting to help 1 million people get equipped here in the United States. And the reason for that is that a decade ago, when the United States finally woke up to the fact that human trafficking was here and present in our country, the numbers at that time were somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 victims, right, of human trafficking in this country. But just about 18 months ago, the state of Texas came out with a report that they have over 300,000 victims in their state alone.
Just alone.
Alone. So if you extrapolate that figure, what we're looking at is potentially 1 million victims here in the U.S. So Justice U, it starts with a 1-hour course. And there's so much more learning opportunities on the other side of it. But in 1 hour, you can learn what is trafficking, how are you going to see it, what do you do when you see it? And we feel like if we get 1 million eyes opened to that here in the U.S., we might just save 1 million lives.
July 30th is UN's World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. We want to make sure everyone is prepared for this day and aware of what you can do to combat human trafficking. So what are some of the signs to look for? How do you know if you are actually being targeted? And then the third thing is, how do we get involved to fight it? What should we do?
Great questions. Thank you for asking them. So the answer is there's so many possibilities, right? So that's great. So because there's so many, I won't cover them all. I'll try to zone in, and you can learn all about them on Justice U, right? All of them, everything you need to know. But first of all, as far as indicators go, it does depend on what kind of trafficking is taking place, right? So here in the U.S., we're talking about labor and sex trafficking victims. We're talking about people who are citizens of our country, people who are not citizens of our country, right? And the number one population being trafficked in our country are our children who are presently or aging out of foster care. This is the number one vulnerable population. So what are you looking for? Today, right now, with COVID-19 and this pandemic going across our country, we're talking about a wild increase in vulnerabilities that drive human trafficking. So people who are not economically stable, people who've lost access to safety nets, and our children are especially vulnerable because they're online, every time I do a training, these are the ones that come up, right? These are the ones that come up the most. So you may have a teacher who realizes a high school student who used to be a great student is all of a sudden becoming truant, right? All of a sudden talking about older boyfriends, all of a sudden acting out in school. And so then she learns about the indicators of human trafficking and realizes what's happening in this child's life is that she's being trafficked, right? So this is a very real scenario. Or we had a woman, I was doing a training up north, and when she got done with the training on the indicators, she immediately realized, and then she made the report, and it broke a whole trafficking ring because this young lady she'd been going to for 2 years doing her nails, she realized, you know what, she is there every day, right? Every day. And that light is on at night. And so she went back and had her nails done again and asked the young girl, well, how old are you? And she said, I'm 18. And that was a huge red flag because the woman realized she told her that exact same answer 2 years ago.
Wow.
And so when she called, she had the courage to call and make that report. It broke a multi-state trafficking ring of nail salons.
Which just kind of leads me to my next question here. You said the calling, the reporting, there are obviously numbers out there, or the websites, and can you give that information out one more time?
Yeah. So we always say, if you're concerned of someone potentially in immediate danger, call 911. Call 911 and ask to speak to someone in the law enforcement who has been trained on human trafficking, right? So you want to get to the right unit. Otherwise, if that unit's not been trained, they might not understand what you're trying to report either. So do that first. And then there's a national human trafficking hotline as well, which is 888-373-7888. So that's the number you call to report things that you're concerned about as well. But if it's an immediate danger situation, always call 911.
More recently, you're saying Ghislaine Maxwell, where she just got picked up being the longtime girlfriend and assistant to Jeffrey Epstein, who is now being accused of actually farming or bringing the girls in to kind of participate or be used in the human sex trafficking ring here. Is this, there's two things, because I feel like when you think of sex trafficking and human trafficking and child trafficking, maybe you only think of the guys being the predators or looking for people, but women can be just the same, or if not more harmful, because I think we trust women more than you would trust a guy coming up to you, right? Or am I wrong in thinking that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. So, and that is one of the key ways that women are involved in sex trafficking or labor trafficking rings, right? So we are naturally inclined to trust a woman more, right? And so there's this idea, there's this myth that trafficking happens by abductions, right, in chains, and that's a huge myth that we've got to debunk. Are people abducted into trafficking? Absolutely, yes. Are chains utilized? Yes, unfortunately, that is absolutely true. But that's not the majority. The majority of the time, what happens is someone builds a relationship of trust with a vulnerable individual, and over time, woos that individual into a situation or a place where now they are controlled. And so traffickers will use women, and sometimes, and many times in this country, it's women that they formerly trafficked, right? And they've really very much broken. And now they're using that woman as she gets older and is no longer someone that people want to buy to sexually exploit. Now they're using that woman differently, right, to recruit and build relationships with younger victims. And this is something we're seeing all across the United
cycle.
States.
It kind of keeps going. You get to a certain age, and now you're recruiting, and now, it just kind of keeps.
Yeah. So the victim becomes, part of the crime, and is victimizing other people. I don't know if that's a situation with Miss Maxwell, but the fact that that is shocking to us tells us how much we have to learn about this.
I want to bring politics into this because so many times people try to, and I'm running as an independent. You can call me a conservative Democrat, liberal Republican, whatever makes anybody feel better, go for it. One thing I've been noticing is people want to blame the other party as who's involved or who's responsible. Is it more of a social class system here, or is it a financial who can afford it versus parties? And I think people have to break that party fighting and get to like what's really driving human trafficking. It's not a conspiracy. It is really happening. Am I right or wrong, or am I kind of right in the right direction with that?
No, I hear you totally. And I appreciate that perspective, because politicizing an issue that is literally impacting and killing millions of people does us zero good. Right? It's zero good, because, and it also what it does is it paints this picture that it's out there somewhere beyond our control, and the powers that are higher than us, right, are warring back and forth. The reality is human trafficking is closer than you think. And the vulnerabilities that are driving it in your country, right? So in our country, just focus on the United States, we're talking about runaway and homeless youth. We're talking about family breakdown. We're talking about a massive rise in opioid-driven trafficking of family members who are trafficking their kids to feed their drug addictions. Those are the things we are truly dealing with. Organized crime, gang-related trafficking, because I can sell a weapon or a drug once, but I can sell a child 20 times a night, right? And I can use that child till she dies or he dies and go get another one. And I'm less likely to get caught for that than I am by trafficking a drug or a weapon, right? So these are the realities to try to kind of cast them in some other realm when it removes our personal responsibility for it, right? And our personal opportunity to engage it and to end it and prevent it in our communities.
I would love to have that as part of the campaign, because for some reason, no other candidate or anybody, even with our state reps and a congressman, they don't really touch on that.
I mean, everyone in your state saying that, right? Because I looked, your governor's office is saying it, right? Your AG's office is saying it.
They don't talk about attacking it and doing something about it.
And they think of it as like this thing over here, when it's positively connected to every possible other thing, right? Yeah. So it's positively connected to your homeless, issues, your social service issues, your gang issues, your domestic violence issues, which are on a pretty steep rise right now, right? In Phoenix, I saw. Right. So if we can see them as connected, right? It's supposed to be a separate thing, right? And because if we don't, we'll never solve it.
I'm definitely going to add this as part of my campaign. And that's why I like having these conversations, because it helps me understand more of things that may be happening that people aren't talking about, or that I need to bring to more front awareness, so that we can all be on board to fight. So
human trafficking, coming together to solve that in your city, it's apolitical, it's a-religious, right? Everyone will come to the table for that. And when they realize they can work together on human trafficking or work together, they realize they can work together on other issues too, right?
Yes.
So it is something that if you are helping people understand, you're not just combating this terrible, awful thing, but you'll be able to work together on other issues too. And many of those that end up driving trafficking in the first place.
Exactly. You said it. It's non-partisan. It's a human issue. It doesn't matter what party. They don't pick up people and say, wait a minute, are you a Republican or are you Democrat? Are you,
no.
Are you what?
No.
Oh, no, we can't touch you. Let's bring it more down to ground level. So you think about pimping. I'm assuming with the with the definitions now and what we're thinking of human trafficking, would pimping, as normally the culture, it's just like, hey man, I'm a pimp, I'm this and this and that. Now, I think people are starting to see that as a form of sex trafficking or human trafficking. Is that correct?
And it absolutely is, yes. Because by legal definition, so I'm a human rights lawyer, so I'll give the legal definition here, right? Trafficking is anything exchanged for value, right? For sex. Well, let's just talk about sex trafficking, not labor trafficking. But you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion, which is all over, right? That kind of situation you're talking about. So if I'm violent or if I'm threatening to be violent, if I'm coercing someone, so I've preyed on someone who's vulnerable, who doesn't have much, right? And I say, hey, I'm going to provide for you, right? You're going to be my girlfriend, or however you couch it. But there's stuff you've got to do for me, right? That individual is being coerced or defrauded, right? Or even forced, if they get out of line, to do things that they would not normally do if they had other opportunities, if they truly had other opportunities, before them. So absolutely, yes. And this idea that we're objectifying a human being, that's what we're talking about right now. This kind of objectification, the sexual objectification, it just is a direct slope into commoditization of human beings, right? So now I don't see you as a soul, right? Worthy of respect and honor and all of the things, right? That we should be looking at each other with. But now I see you as a thing I can buy, right? To like an object. And that's all of that is related to sex trafficking. And we have got to wake up to that as a culture.
Since you're a lawyer, I'm going to ask this question now too, because was the, I guess the charges of if a pimp was arrested and taken in, what would that charge be? I don't know, 20 years, you know what I mean? Versus now, is it still kind of fall in the same category as it did then now? Or because the rise in human trafficking and more awareness, are the charges more steep?
I just trained a couple of months ago law enforcement and district attorneys who had never received training on human trafficking ever. And so their state had passed a fantastic law that had a lot of teeth to it, right? To send people away for a very long time and to protect victims, right? And not prosecute victims, which is what was happening in this country. It was just a few years ago when I was working with law enforcement, and defense attorneys and prosecutors. And what was happening in that city was a 14-year-old was being arrested and charged with prostitution. The man who bought her was being fined what he had paid, and the trafficker was never gone after.
Wow.
And so we can pass laws, but it takes time to implement those and to
Right.
train the people on the ground to do it.
Right. Well, and which leads me into another thing I wanted to talk about. A hot term right now is defund the police. People defund the police. And I think people don't really fully understand what defunding the police means. So to hear you say that, a lot of organizations or a couple of law enforcement agencies locally don't have that training and are not familiar with it. Well, then maybe we should be taking some of these funds and putting it towards that as well.
Absolutely, yes. In my rather extensive experience with our law enforcement here in the U.S. and around the world, it's often a case of lack of education and lack of resources, not lack of will, and not even corruption, right? So although those elements can absolutely be present, right, and we've got to root that out, there's zero tolerance, for that kind of thing. But most law enforcement just don't know. They don't know what it is they're supposed to be looking for, just like we don't either. And so we've got to increase education. We've got to increase community resources, because it does no good to train a law enforcement how to identify and rescue a sex trafficking victim if when they do that, there's no place for them to go. There's nothing in the community to care for them. There are no resources for them, because that means that individual is going to be taken out of the situation and then dropped where? On the streets, where they're going to be exploited again. And these are the realities that law enforcement face. So I do love what your platform is. I saw it, which is let's work together, right? Let's work together to come up with solutions and look at the reality in its face and try to figure out how do we bring everyone around the table to solve it.
Yeah. You know what, Ashleigh, thank you so much for that. I want to end with this because I believe this is very powerful, and it's a meme that's kind of going around and they've probably seen it, but presented differently. But it says they should start reporting the number of kids that go missing every day the way they report COVID numbers. Maybe that would get people's attention and realize child trafficking is not a conspiracy theory. I think that's powerful, because what do you think would happen if we really did, maybe not instead of a COVID count, but in addition, if there's somewhere that you can really see, you get that morning alert, instead of saying how many coronavirus cases and deaths, it said, hey, in your county, in your city, across the U.S., blank number of kids have been human trafficked or sex trafficked, labor trafficked, whatever you want to call it. What if we had an alert like that? How do you think that might impact our country?
Well, I find that people react two ways, right? And so either they want to run in and bang down those doors, right? They're so incensed and so outraged by the reality, right, of this. So when you hear like 300,000 kids are missing in this country right now, and we believe that they're in the hands of traffickers in our country, right? People go, that cannot possibly be true, because they're not hearing those numbers daily, right? But they don't sit in the meetings I sit in where, a social services agency lost 3,000 kids, right? They lost track of 3,000 kids. So into the hands of what they fear are traffickers. So those numbers are true, but most people will say either, or they might freeze, right? They might freeze like a deer in the headlights. And they think, how could I make a difference on something like that? And that's why we build Justice U, because you can. All you need is the knowledge about what human trafficking is and know how to see it and how to report it.
And with the course, everybody can get their online certificates. They can get their badge once they've been educated. Now, there's a small fee with it. And I say small fee just because every course you got to, it costs to have the resources, right? But what I love is it's actually living on. It's going to help other people. Can you explain on that?
That's right. So this Closer Than You Think campaign, the thing that we're offering now is 3 online courses and a year of access to insane amounts of resources for $50. What we're doing with that $50 is half of it is going to help us to create even more courses in Justice U to deal with even more issues to equip you. And the other half we're donating right now. We're donating to shelters who are providing care for victims and survivors who are desperately hurting for funds right now because of the global pandemic. So we're trying to check all the boxes.
And that website, one more time, is
learnwithjusticeu.com.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm excited because I'm going to take my classes. I'm going to be certified because I believe in what you're doing. And thank you for what you're doing, because like we said at the beginning, if we can reach one person a day, we have millions of people, 4 million people every week listen to the shows and everything I do. If one person can be that spark to make that difference and against human trafficking and sex trafficking, I think we've done our job. So Ashleigh, I appreciate you. I'd love to have more conversations with you in the future, and you are welcome on our show anytime. Thank you so much.
Hope your campaign goes great.